The primary purpose of the Seder is to feel as if we personally experience this exodus from Egypt. So as we're feeling that we're coming through the exodus, through the various parts of this beautiful experience, we're also sharing this gratitude.
On In Good Faith, we believe that all faith traditions have something to teach us about how God is working in the world and in our lives. So join us as we listen and learn. I'm speaking in faith today with Cantor Sharon Brown Levy. She is the cantor at Congregation Kol Ami, and of her many talents, the one we're calling on most today, besides she's just always a teacher at heart. You can tell that the moment she opens her mouth, she loves to share. But she's also a gifted musician, and we wanted to know about the music of Passover. I'm in studio today with senior producer Heather Bigley.
Hello.
And also our student producer Josh Orton.
Shalom.
The cantor is a return guest, and it's so fun to have someone who knows us and we know them, and we can just get down to brass tacks and start singing as we do. So it was a delight to have her on again.
Cantor Sharon Brown Levy, certified in cantorial arts from both the Reform Movement's American Conference of Cantors and the Conservative Movement's Cantors Assembly. Prior to her arrival here in Utah, she served pulpits in Toronto, Wisconsin, New Jersey, and Florida. She's also a respected choral conductor, co-leading one of the country's largest community interfaith choirs, Voices in Harmony. I wanted to start by just asking her how the week of Passover progresses.
The holiday of Passover outside the land of Israel is observed by most diaspora Jews for 8 days, unless you're of the Reform movement. The Reform movement celebrates it 7 days, as Israel does. But when you're working outside the land of Israel, which we call the diaspora, it is an 8-day commemoration. And the first 2 days and the last days of Passover are what we call the holiest days. And as we approach the actual services that occur in the synagogue, both evening and morning on those days, at our homes, we create a service that is called a Seder, which means order. And there's actually an order of events that occurs all over the world in people's homes as they welcome family, friends, guests. So the first 2 nights are Seder nights, where this very elaborate service, including symbolic foods, very special music, activities. We are actually experientially trying to recreate the exodus from Egypt and commemorating our freedom from 400 years of slavery. We relive this experience at the Seder and through parts of our religious services as well, which are in addition to the 2 Seders.
Are there songs that would be sung in the service that might not be at home and vice versa, or are they interchangeable?
This is also a great question. So the answer is yes and. So the service has its very own unique qualities. Certain pieces ascribe specifically to the service, although there are varying melodies depending on where you are in the world, and also varying customs done at the Seder depending on your individual family traditions or your ethnic tradition. There are Jews of varying backgrounds in the world. They're usually categorized into 2 major ones. There are others, but the 2 major ones are Ashkenazi, which are Eastern European Jewish traditions. That's the majority of the United States and North American Canadian Jews usually come from Ashkenazi heritage, but there are quite a number of Jews that come from Sephardic heritage, which are originally of Spain and the Middle East area. There are also Mizrahi Jews, there are Ethiopian Jews, Jews all over the world, even in small pockets in the Far East, varying other places, even though we're in small numbers. There are varying traditions for Passover, many common elements, and one that is common to all of the denominations of Judaism, as well as in parts of our Seder, is called the Psalms of Hallel. So the Psalms, we ascribe actually 150 songs to King David and some of his helpers over the years. And the Psalms that I'm focusing on out of the 150 are the 6 that we call the Egyptian Hallel. And if you've heard of the word hallelujah, right, most people know that. That's a Hebrew word that's been used in multiple language. Hallel means praise. Hallelujah, it's a plural form. And then Yah is one of the many ineffable, unpronounceable names of God. So hallelujah means we praise God or in praise of God. And so all of them start with the word hallelujah. They're recited not only at Passover, but also at the other major biblical festivals of the 5 books of Moses. So let me sing you an excerpt of Hallel. So there is an actual introductory blessing that starts Hallel, but I want to begin with one of the Psalms. It's not the very first one, but it is the most common one that is stated in Seders as well as at the services. So it is called Bitseit Yisrael. I'd like to give you the translation so everyone kind of gets an idea of what this means. All right, this is Psalm 113. When the people Israel came out of Egypt, the house of Jacob from a foreign nation, Judah became God's holy place. The people Israel became God's dominion. Now we have these wonderful images. I love these images. Seeing them, the sea took flight. The Jordan flowed backward. Mountains pranced like rams, hills like newborn lambs. O sea, why run away? Jordan, why flow backward? Mountains, why prance like rams? Hills, why dance like lambs? Earth, shake before your master's presence. Tremble before the God of Jacob, who turns mountain peaks to pools, flint to fountains. It's just absolutely gorgeous imagery of, I mean, you can picture, we live in such a beautiful area here in Utah. Could you imagine if all of this nature reacted as such? So here's how part of this goes. It's a rather long one. I'll just give you a couple of phrases. B'tzeit Yisrael mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov me'am lo'ez. Hayta Yehuda likodsho, Yisrael mamshilotav, Hayam Ra'av Ayanos Hayarden Yisov Le'achor Heharim Rakidu Che'elim Givaot Kivnei Tzon. Just the beginning, so you get an idea.
And it's true that I am seeing you and you have a smile on your face, but I think just the melody itself and the rhythm does contain a certain amount of joy.
Absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. 100%.
There is another song that really captured my imagination in some material that you sent that we'll link to in our show notes. It's about a traditional song during the celebration of Passover, meaning it would have been enough for us.
Dayenu.
Dayenu.
The word day in Hebrew is enough. Enu is for us, is a suffix for us. It would have been enough for us.
It's lovely to see this recounting of the many miracles of God for the people. If God would have taken us out of Egypt, it would have been enough for us. I'm just skipping through. If he would have split the sea for us and not let us go through, it would have been enough for us. So all of these different things were enough, and yet God has done so much. That seems to be what I'm feeling from this. Is that the intent?
The primary purpose of the Seder is to feel as if we personally experience this exodus from Egypt. So we are, as we're feeling that we're coming through the exodus, through the various parts of this beautiful experience, we're also sharing this gratitude. And we're not only reflecting on the exodus, but all the times throughout our people's history, or at least early history, and there have been many, many, even after Dayenu was written, that we are showing a sense of humility, a sense of gratitude for everything that had happened, whether it's related to the Exodus itself or beyond that point. It's kind of an outlook on how we lead our lives. So what do we live in now? An era of capitalism, right? And increasingly in a global sense, in regard to religion, consumption is unfettered by any internal sense of restraint, from whatever soda we can drink to how much money Wall Street executives even make. Dayenu reminds us that there is another way. Judaism offers this outlook on wealth and consumption and sufficiency that is countercultural. In this beautiful text called The Ethics of Our Ancestors, or Pirkei Avot, it says, one of the great teachers, Ben Soma, writes, "Who is rich? The one who is content with what one has." We want to take care of what we have, take care of our planet, take care of our possessions. Judaism is certainly not ascetic. We are encouraged at times to carve out occasions for a little excess within reason, for enjoying finer parts of living, such as Shabbat, holidays, and other joys. But the wisdom here is that if we want to experience delight on special occasions, we also need moments of restraint. This, to me, is the basis of Dayenu. We are showing restraint, we're showing humility, we're showing gratitude for it's this juxtaposition of restraint and largesse that creates this life of meaning.
Could you share a little of that with us? It's like the words are the little ingots, but when they're put to music, it's like they get put in the fire and they start to glow.
The beginning of Dayenu says, had God brought us out from Egypt and not executed judgment against the Egyptians, it would have been enough for us, Dayenu. Had God executed judgment against them and not destroyed their idols, Dayenu, enough for us. Had he destroyed their idols and not slain their firstborn, it would have been enough. Every piece we are grateful for at every level of the story. So it's amazing, and I would say eternal expression of gratitude based on coming from that point. It is because we were freed from Egypt that we can be the people we are today. So at the beginning, we speak before singing, how many favors has God bestowed upon us? Ilu hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. We say, even if God had just given us the Torah, Ilu natan lanu eta Torah, natan lanu eta Torah, Dayenu. And one of my favorites is, as we've come through all of that, all of these trials and tribulations that God has helped us through, we conclude that set almost with, if God had just brought us to the land of Israel. This was way later in time, but remembering that every step is important to reaching the goal. Ilu hichnisanu le'eretz Yisrael, hichnisanu le'eretz Yisrael, Dayenu.
You're listening to In Good Faith. I'm Stephen Cap Perry. We'll be back with more. Hi, Stephen Cap Perry here, host of In Good Faith. Here's another podcast from our BYU Radio family of podcasts I hope you'll check out. What I love is real. You know that saying, real, recognize real? That's Lisa on The Lisa Show. Lisa Valentine Clark is a comedian. She's a believer, a single mother. And on The Lisa Show podcast, you'll hear from the Council of Moms, a genius idea, which is actually one of my favorite parts of her show. And you'll hear about the challenges of life, parenting, mental health questions, social issues. Yes, you'll hear from experts, but also from people discussing their where the rubber meets the road life experience. It's The Lisa Show, wherever you get your podcasts. You're listening to In Good Faith. Right now we're discussing the songs of Passover with Cantor Sharon Brown Levy. I knew there was a little part for the youngest child.
Yes.
Somewhere in the Seder, but I didn't know exactly what it was. But there's actually the song, The Four Questions, that ties in with that. Will you talk to me about that song?
So the number 4 is really significant in the Jewish tradition because it is said in Torah times that God redeemed us 4 different ways. So we recite 4 questions. There are 4 cups of wine or grape juice. But the 4 questions were considered to have first been uttered by Moses' youngest child, whose name was Gershon, which means the stranger can dwell with us. It's a beautiful name. And it's said that as the angel of death was passing over the homes that had been spared because the blood of the Paschal Lamb had been placed over the doorposts of the homes to spare the Jewish people, as this horrific night of screaming and shouting and terrible loss was occurring amongst the Egyptians, The Jews living in Goshen, in that section of Egypt, were the only ones spared, and Gershon actually asked these questions. So when the Seder was formed officially many, many years later and was continued to be uttered, iterated by Jews all over the world, they always included Gershon's questions and had decided to assign it to the youngest child. Didn't matter which gender, didn't have to be a boy at the Seder. One time, I happened to be the youngest person at a Seder as a grown adult, and the position was given to me. This is my college years. It was actually a really neat experience where I didn't have family locally, and there was a professor who invited students who needed a place to go and invited other members of the faculty who were of varying traditions of faith. It was really neat. The official first question reads, on all other nights, we may eat either leavened or unleavened bread. On this night, only unleavened bread, which we call matzah. And it's sung. Right? And there are many different ways of singing these 4 questions. I learned a different one when I was a child from the one that I teach my students, the kids of the religious school here. The most common one today that the kids seem to enjoy in my many years of teaching is Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot kulo matzah. The second question reads, on all other nights, we may eat any vegetable. On this night, we're required to eat bitter herbs. So as you see, as these questions are coming forth, you're getting kind of a preview of the symbolic foods of the Seder. Every food that sits on the Seder plate has a very special symbolic meaning, linking us to the recollection of this Exodus. The third question reads, on all other nights, we are not bidden to dip our vegetables even once, but on this night, we dip them twice. They'll be dipped in salt water to remind us of the tears that the Israelites experienced over hundreds of years of slavery. And then there is a dipping of the bitter herbs, which reflect the sadness of slavery. And finally, the last question, on all other nights, we eat our meals in any manner. On this night, why do we sit around a table together leaning? Why do we lean back? And when I was a child in my Seder, my family set up pillows at every single seat because we are supposed to rejoice in the fact that we can relax and be free, where we always had to be upright and rigid as slaves.
Beautiful imagery, and you can see why over the centuries, by asking and then answering those same questions year by year, family by family, event by event, that these answers are part of everyone who has participated. Is there music tied in with Elijah the prophet?
Oh, yes. So Elijah is a very important piece of, according to our greatest sages and teachers of years ago, his purpose of existence was to help us as a people be a harbinger of messianic times, time of great peace. And so out of our greatest affliction as slaves, we are praying that the world can come to a time of peace. And so there are 4 cups that we drink, but there is another cup that is set aside that is not touched. It's filled to the brim with sweet wine, and it is actually set for Elijah. There's a part where we mention, this is towards the end of the Seder, that we welcome Elijah into our homes symbolically, and usually someone is designated, doesn't have to be a child, but children love doing this, to actually open the door wide, which is a symbol of welcoming, right? Like, God willing, Elijah even symbolically would enter our homes. That the idea is that we're opening our minds, that the world can come to a better place. And that Elijah reminds us that with all of the strife on earth, there is that possibility. There is that possibility. And so we sing this beautiful piece that celebrates Elijah, which says, Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Elijah the Tishbite, Eliyahu HaGiladi, the Gileadite. Bimhera v'yaminu, may it come quickly in our days. Yavo elenu, to come to us. Im Mashiach ben David, the symbolic messianic time coming from the lineage of David, the messianic time coming from the lineage of David. So you get up from the table, everyone stands, watches someone open the door, and we focus on the door being open and the cup is held up to greet Elijah like this. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi.
So, this particular celebration that involves every member of the family can involve every person in the congregation. There is the symbolism, there are the questions, the answers, there's the beautiful music that helps, to me, enliven any tradition. When this is all said and done and sung, what do you hold in your heart from the process of observing the Passover? And how does that leave your connection with God?
It's so very strong. We have to remember that in order to create the Seder and also to observe the Passover throughout the week, it is so much more, by the way, than just the Seder and the services. It's weeks of preparation. You're literally doing a ritualized spring cleaning for 2 weeks. You're prepping for days to get ready for people to come into your home to have the Seder. You've got to shop for all of the symbolic foods. And if you can't get them in Utah because they're not all easy to get, you've got to order them in advance. It's a tremendous amount of prep, which involves a lot of energy. And then all of a sudden you're at the Seder and you've got to maintain the energy level throughout. I mean, there's so many different moving parts to this that it can leave you feeling not only very fulfilled because it's been so long in the preparation and in the execution, but that you just want to sleep for several days. It's just a feeling of, let's just sit and relax. Let's just be and process this. It's also a time to socialize. People tend to ask a little bit more questions to clarify. It's a beautiful time to share this incredible experience of the Exodus with friends and family and just be, just authentically be yourselves.
Well, as always, a delight to speak with you, Cantor Sharon Brown Levy.
Our synagogue hosts every year at Kol Ami a second night Seder for the entire community. So if there's anyone out there in the local area or the extended local area that would like to be a part, you're welcome to come to any one of the services. It's one of my great passions, and I'd love to have you as our guests to come celebrate with us.
I was speaking with Cantor Sharon Brown Levy about songs and how they are worked into the Passover observances and the Passover meal. I loved what I learned because there was so much to learn. When you're starting from almost zero, everything is knowledge. So Dayenu, that it's enough for us. It would have been enough, God, if you had done this one thing, and yet you did this. And that would have been enough. But you also did this. It's this whole song of gratitude. Not just we're very grateful, God, for all your goodness, but actually enumerating, like when you're done with that song, you could name 12 things that God had done for you as a people or as a person.
Right.
I really love that.
I mean, we talk about having holy envy all the time. I just have envy for her singing voice because I couldn't catch a tune for the life of me. But her talking about Dayenu was really awesome, that she could say, well, look, we're trying to relive the Exodus. We're trying to remember this hardships that our people went through, right? Going through hundreds of years of slavery, but we are still thankful. We still have gratitude in our hearts. And even though we went through all this stuff, we're looking at the good that God has done for us, for all of the blessings that he's given us. And that's what they're choosing to focus on, rather just focusing on the hardships, which they didn't say, oh, we never had hardships. Right? It's not this Pollyannic thing. But we remember our hardships, but we also remember God delivering us.
And the joy.
Yeah.
So I think it's done really well because you can hear the songs. Someone goes and opens the door. There's a physical action.
Right.
You're tasting something bitter, and there is a little sweet element that you could celebrate the sweetness of freedom at the end of it all. And you've got candles that are part of it to look at, as well as the food you see laid out. And then, of course, the social aspect that, as she mentioned, you've been preparing and getting the food and having to plan ahead of time. And then you're all there together. It just involves so many different aspects of life and living that I love knowing more about it. I love knowing more about the music.
I think the thing that the cantor is saying to us, yes, we're looking backward to remember this thing, but it's pointing us forward in how we should have hope and how we should approach the future. Next year we'll be in Jerusalem. next year there will be peace. Next year we will be holy. We as a people want to be healed and we want to move forward. And how beautiful. May we all have that.
When I hear the word Passover, I'm going to imbue it with a lot more meaning than I would have been able to before these conversations. Many thanks to Cantor Sharon Brown Levy for speaking with us. This episode was produced by Heather Bigley and Josh Orton. Our production team also includes Leah King, Katerina Martinich, and Ashton Rowan. Our post-production sound designers are Mark Hansen, Brandon Lewis, Daniel Phillips, and Carly Wilson. In Good Faith is committed to the idea that we all benefit from hearing people of widely varying backgrounds share their personal experience with faith and belief. In fact, we think people with such experience deserve some of our best listening. If interfaith understanding is important to you, be sure to leave a comment or a review on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on Twitter at In Good Faith Pod, on Instagram and Facebook, In Good Faith Podcast. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/@in-good-faith. In Good Faith is a production of BYU Radio. I'm Stephen Cap Perry. I hope you join me again soon, right here in Good Faith.